We're going to do that in about 15 minutes, but our next speaker is a total pro, can roll with the punches. And I'm pleased to introduce Kevin Bishop, who's found his voice and passion in creating and facilitating transformational development experiences that empower people to unleash their individual and collective magic and grow their careers they love. He's a proponent of strength-based development and believes that individuals, teams, and organizations, and ultimately the world in general, are all better off when we're able to leverage our unique strengths, which is clearly a theme that we've heard from today. So I'm excited to welcome Kevin Bishop to the main stage. So Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Great to be with you all. 1 second here. I was going to share my screen. Get started. All right, here we go. So as Tyler mentioned, my name is Kevin Bishop. I am a principal talent partner with LinkedIn. I'm based out of my home office in Chicago, and really excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about reframing. When I was told the topic of this, or the theme for this year's summit, I was really excited. This is a favorite thing of mine to talk about. And specifically, I want to talk a little bit about how we can reframe our approach to career development within our organizations. So what we'll cover today, we're going to cover the why. Why should we be thinking a bit differently about career development within our organizations? The reframe itself. So what exactly do we need to be thinking differently about? The how do we bring it to life for our employees? And then the reinforcement, because we all know a good reframe can't take hold within our organizations without reinforcement. And then we'll leave some time for questions and comments at the end as well. I'm a big believer that, what I'm sharing with you is based on my thoughts, my experience, but I'm also really happy to learn from all of you and your experiences and your thoughts as well. So let's jump in and start with the why. As I am sure you're all aware, career development and internal mobility are top priorities of organizations given our current macro environment. Lots of buzz around these topics. Companies are really looking at how to retain employees by creating these opportunities for them to move around internally in order to achieve their career goals. Now, they're also looking at how to create more equity in hiring and career development opportunities by taking a skills-first approach. If you've not heard the term skills first, you will be hearing all about it in the months and years to come. So that's really all about looking at an individual's skills rather than their pedigree in terms of educational background and prior experience with other companies. But why is adopting this skills-first approach to career development and internal mobility so important? Well, working at LinkedIn has a lot of perks, and one of them is having access to some really great data. And earlier this year, we released our 2023 Workplace Learning Report, which has lots of great information. I'm happy to point you to that a little bit later. But based on all of that data, we know that the skills for jobs are actually evolving really quickly. Skill sets for jobs have changed by around 25% since 2015, and that number is expected to double by 2027. So as our CEO, Ryan Roslansky, likes to say, if you're not changing jobs, your job is changing on you. The data also showed us that 89% of learning and development professionals agreed that we have to ensure that our people have the right skills that they need to navigate this constantly evolving macro environment we're in. Side note, who were the 11% that didn't agree with that? I'm not sure. And we also know that there's a clear tie between retention and career development and internal mobility opportunities. Our report actually showed that at the 2-year mark, an employee who has made an internal move has a 75% likelihood of staying with their company, whereas an employee who has not been able to make an internal move only has a 56% likelihood of staying. So we can see why skills first, career development, internal mobility are such hot topics for organizations right now, Organizations and executives know that they need to be focusing on the skills of their employees in order to meet some of the challenges that they're currently facing. Now, while companies and executives are saying that they're prioritizing skills first, career development, and internal mobility, some interesting data emerged. Only 15% of employees said that their organizations encouraged them to move into a new role. Only 26% said that their organizations challenged them to learn a new skill. And only 14% said their organizations encouraged them to build a career development plan. So it seems that organizations have a whole lot of work to do in terms of bringing these efforts around career development and internal mobility to life for their employees. And while we could spend all day, week, month, year probably talking about internal talent architecture, policy updates, talent management practices, I actually want to talk about something that I think gets closer to the heart of the matter. So for any organizational efforts around internal mobility and career development to be successful, we first have to help employees themselves reframe what career development means to them. What do I mean by that? Well, many of us came out of school and began our careers in our chosen fields thinking that with some hard work, we'd continue to advance up the chain in a linear fashion. The career path ahead of us looked like a straight line. But I'm going to guess that many, if not most of us on this call today, didn't actually experience it that way. I know personally, I started my career as an actor and a singer. I thought coming out of school, I was going to do some really cool non-union theatrical work in Chicago, work my way into those larger, better paying jobs, maybe do some touring, and with some hard work and luck, end up on Broadway, right? And here I am in talent development at LinkedIn and loving it, by the way. But how did I end up here? You know, on my own career journey, I found myself, I'll tell you a little story, right? I found myself working a lot as an actor, but unsurprisingly, at this stage of my life, and probably to most of you, it doesn't pay that great. So I found myself needing to supplement my income with a day job. And what ended up happening was I was working a series of these corporate day jobs, eventually winding up in a reporting and analytics role as part of a sales operations team. And while I learned a whole lot and developed some interesting skills in that role, I was finding that the work itself was really unfulfilling to me. So I had to take a pause. I had to reflect on my strengths and what it was that I loved so much about the theatrical work that I did. And what I realized was that people come to the theater because they want to experience something through a lens other than their own, through the characters' experiences. So what I really loved about this work was helping people see things a bit differently, expanding the way that they viewed the world. And, you know, this was a strength that I had developed and a skill through this theatrical training and experience. Now, once I knew that that was really what motivated me about this work, I did a little bit of dreaming. I asked myself, what are some other ways to help people broaden their perspectives? I looked into coaching by going through a coaching certification program. And interestingly, an opportunity actually came available within the organization I was working on, the learning and development team. I was able to submit, I was hired, and my career trajectory completely changed. Since then, I've been able to have the opportunity to help countless people expand the way they think about things, but it's through coaching and through developing and facilitating learning programs and consulting with my stakeholders on their talent initiatives. On paper, this looks like a complete career pivot, but in reality, I just found a new outlet for my skills and my talents and my passions. So I tell you that story to say that this reframe we're talking about for our employees is all about encouraging them to think more creatively about their own career paths. Now, if you follow me or anyone else at LinkedIn on the LinkedIn platform, you've likely seen this graphic representing the winding paths that career journeys can take. But while those of us who've been around for a little while know that most likely our journeys have not been very linear at all, there still seems to be a perception among employees that their organization should provide them a step-by-step recipe for advancement. Now, don't get me wrong, I do believe that organizations should have and communicate a clear development philosophy, but that philosophy has to be based on a partnership with employees. So for example, at LinkedIn, we believe that employees own and drive their careers. Managers support employees' growth, and LinkedIn enables that growth by providing skill building opportunities. So how do we help employees reframe their own career journeys and really embrace the winding paths that we all know are lying ahead of them in this new skills-first world? Well, it all starts with our approach to career planning. Now, at LinkedIn, I talk to a lot of our employees about career planning. I try to keep it simple for them, and I talk about it in terms of 3 steps: dream, plan, and activate. And there is our alert. Let's pause for a moment. There we go.
And we're back.
We're back. So as I was saying, I talk to a lot of folks about career development planning at LinkedIn, and I talk about it in terms of 3 steps: dream, plan, and activate. Now, without realizing it at the time, these are actually the steps I took myself as I was navigating my own career transformation. And I have to say, it sure would have been helpful back then to have a framework like 5 dynamics to help me manage my energy through that transition and that transformation. But having it now really does help facilitate some of these conversations I have with employees. 5 dynamics is well integrated into the LinkedIn culture. It's a common language that we use when we're talking about all kinds of things, and career development is no different. So we can actually map these 3 steps: dream, plan, and activate, to the dynamics in a fairly straightforward way. Dream is all about the explore dynamic. Plan is about excite and examine. And activate is all about execute. And of course, we want to be constantly evaluating as we go through this process. So as we're going through each step, I can actually let folks know which dynamic they'll want to lean into so that they can dial up or down their energy in that dynamic as needed. This common language, as I said, really does help us understand each step a little bit better. But I want to take a look at each of these steps with you just briefly. The first step that I use in talking about career planning is dream. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this step as it tends to be the one that folks find most challenging. And yet it's actually the one that's most critical for this career development reframe to work for our people. Now, I'm going to start by saying that I know dream doesn't sound very corporate talent professional guy, but hear me out. Hopefully your organization is encouraging employees to complete career development plans regularly. And if not, I highly encourage you to do so. But many of the career development plans I've come across during my time with a variety of organizations don't encourage dreaming. They encourage reflecting on your values, your strengths, your skills, your ambitions, all wonderful things to reflect on. But often, as human beings, we have difficulty seeing beyond our current circumstances or our current context. So as we're developing our career development plans, we let our current context dictate what we believe is possible. But when we spend time dreaming, we're actually letting go of those limitations and adding a little bit of fun and joy and adventure to the career planning process. And that can help us identify and unlock possibilities that we've never considered before. If I think about my own journey, the transformation story I just told, if I had not dreamt, I probably would still be grinding away at the actor profession, not making very much money and, being moderately successful. Who knows if I would have made it to Broadway, but the odds are pretty slim for most folks. But it was by dreaming that I looked outside of my current circumstances and I found something that I loved just as much as the theater and found just as fulfilling. So what we're talking about here is asking our people to think more creatively about how they can best leverage their skills. In this dream step, we're leaning into that explore dynamic and reflecting, yes, reflecting on our values, our current skills, and our ambitions. We're asking ourselves, how do those things align to our current role or our current work? Where might things be out of alignment? What do I want to do next? But this is also where we have to question whether or not we're letting our current context limit our options or limit what we think is possible. And if we find that we are limiting ourselves, PS, 90% of the time we are, we can intentionally set those limitations to the side for a moment and play with some unconventional or even outrageous possibilities. We want to ask ourselves, what are other outlets that might exist for our skills and our talents and our passions? And then what other skills might I need to develop in order to achieve the things that I'm dreaming of? I mentioned before that this, can be a tough part of the process for some folks, especially if they don't have high levels of explore energy. And so, maybe they don't know what they want to do next, or maybe they feel pressure to have a perfect final destination in mind. So they may need some help brainstorming possibilities. And it's important to note that this step is really all about just exploring what's next on the journey. You don't have to have a final destination worked out. And if you do, you should be aware that it could very likely change down the road. I mentioned before how quickly jobs and the skills needed to do them are changing. So once we have done a little bit of dreaming and we have a direction in mind, we can begin the plan step where we lean into excite and examine. And in this phase, we're thinking about those skills and experiences that we need to develop, not necessarily things we've already honed, but what else do we need to develop or experiences do we need to gain in order to move us toward those dreams? This is where we're getting input and buy-in from our managers and others who can support us in eventually activating our plan. And, looking for those people who may be able to connect us to opportunities. We really want to be building our plans around hands-on experience, social learning, and formal learning. Yes, 70-20-10 model is what I'm thinking. I don't care so much about the percentages themselves, as long as we're weighting the hands-on experience most heavily. I think we all are aware, or hopefully should be aware, that when we're developing new skills, until we actually put them to use, they're not very likely to stick. We may gain some information about what we are trying to do differently, but until we actually put it into practice, we're not likely to be able to build those skills to the potential that we may have. And then you want to also think here about engaging mentors and sponsors and looking for stretch assignments or even just ways to practice new skills in your current environment. Again, if I go back to my own career transformation journey, this step for me was all about getting in touch with a former colleague who was a coach so I could learn more about her experience as a coach, talking to an internal colleague in learning and development to see what skills I have that might align to that work, but also what skills might I need to develop in order to be prepared to do that kind of work. And then working with my manager to find opportunities to get some of that experience. I remember asking my manager in that sales operations role, hey, can I lead some of the technical training here? I just want to get some experience with that. And turns out it went really well and set me up to be successful in some of the work I'm doing now. So once we have this plan in place, we can then lean into the execute dynamic and activate it. This is all about where we take action and bring our plan to life. I'm going to pause here to say, I think everyone in this activate step is looking for that major transformational experience that's just instantly going to change their lives and their career paths. But we're actually much better served by looking for small opportunities that can help us get incrementally closer to our goals. So activating my own plan, again, really involved lots of small steps. I took on a leadership role within an employee resource group at my organization, which allowed me to build my network and build those influencing and program management skills. I enrolled in that coaching program and began coaching clients on the side so I could really hone those skills around having development conversations with people. It was all about finding opportunities to sort of piece together the skills and the experiences that I needed to eventually move into the type of work I wanted to be doing more of whenever that became available to me more formally. So you'll note that I've represented these 3 steps as a cycle. I mentioned earlier, just as with 5 dynamics, we want to encourage folks to revisit and reevaluate their plans frequently. Earlier, we talked again about how quickly roles and the skills needed to perform them are changing. So it's likely that a plan developed even 1 year ago could become outdated pretty quickly. So if we truly want to help our employees reframe how they're thinking about their own career development and really taking ownership of those adventurous paths ahead of them, we want to encourage them to continually dream, plan, activate, and then adjust. So personally, I'm constantly reevaluating my own plan. The age-old question, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? I hate that question because honestly, I could see myself doing any number of things, right? At one point, I just started answering, I'm going to be a chief learning officer. I don't actually know if I want to do that job, but I needed a short answer to that question. So rather than focusing on where we want to be in 5 or 10 years, a process like Dream Plan Activate can really help us incrementally develop our career path, which is actually a whole lot more important in today's environment than focusing on a destination. I think the days of picking, that final destination for your career and following the path linearly are long gone. And so we really want to be thinking about the journey itself and how we're leveraging our skills in the most effective way to do fulfilling work. But for this reframing of how employees think about their careers to really take hold, it has to be reinforced by the organization. So we can help reinforce this by building it into our organizational culture. And a few tips here, there are lots of ways we could go about this, but I just wanted to offer a few tips. First, we want to be able to clearly articulate our career development philosophy so that everyone in the organization is aware of it and understands it. When people are not aware or if they don't understand our philosophy on career development, they're more likely to sit back and wait for direction or guidance. They don't know what to do or how to do it within the context of the organization. Next, communicate consistently. I think we're all probably aware that consistent messaging is critical to making any change stick. So you want to make sure your people are hearing about career development regularly, and not just from talent development, but from executive leaders and senior leaders. This is what's going to signal to the organization and to employees that it's really important. Encourage regular career planning activities and conversations. Maybe you want to create a schedule or a cadence. Perhaps this is aligned with your annual review process or your mid-year check-in cycles. Also, consider creating a career action plan template if you don't already have one. And if we think back to that statistic, only 14% of employees say that their organizations encourage them to create a career action plan. That's a little bit bleak. So a lot of times that's because organizations haven't created the right tools for people to be able to do that. So if you're able to create a template or guidelines around how to create a career plan, you're setting your employees, and side note, their managers, up for success when it comes to creating their career development plans. Recognize and reward development of new skills, not just promotions. We all get excited when we see those promotion announcements. I just saw one come through last week. It's great. We all want to congratulate the folks that were recently promoted. But when people only see recognition in the form of promotions, they begin to believe that that's the only option for them when it comes to career development. So we want to start recognizing new skill development so that we can demonstrate that the organization values skills and the specific skills and strengths that each employee brings, aligned to their own career aspirations. And then my final tip is to create opportunities. People are going to be much less likely to engage in career planning if they see no other outlets for their skills. So you want to be able to create opportunities for people to engage in things like rotational assignments or stretch projects or anything that allows them to develop new skills that may not be directly related to their current roles yet. Who knows by 2027, right? So it's really about celebrating people's new skills development and the opportunities that that presents. You also want to highlight examples of people who've transformed their careers in unexpected ways. This really demonstrates that the organization supports people's unique career journeys. So just to reiterate, as we're coming to the end of my formal presentation, and we'll open it up to conversation, in order for our organization's efforts around skills first, career development, internal mobility to be successful, and organizations many of them are engaging in these efforts. In order for those efforts to be successful, we have to help our employees reframe how they're thinking about their own career paths. If we don't do that, a lot of our efforts are going to be in vain. Dream, plan, activate has been a really simple and effective approach to career planning that I've used, but you've got to find what works for you and your organization. The important thing is to just get people thinking creatively about what's possible for them based on their skills, their talents, and their passions. So I'm going to stop talking now and open it up to some questions or comments. Again, would love to hear your thoughts on career development and how that's going within your organizations as well.
Thanks, Kevin. Your message resonates with me. As my intro, I gave everybody my backstory, which was 20 years in the wine industry, and now I'm working with Karen. What happened? And ultimately, I went through a very similar exercise to where it wasn't the what do I want to be when I grow up, but it was like, what am I passionate about? What do I love to do? And a lot of the same things that I actually did in the wine industry, take wine out of it and insert what we're doing with 5 Dynamics and Simplify, and it's a lot of the same things. And I think Karen hopefully saw that connection was made, and I've been super happy and super content with a completely different trajectory. So I share too that squiggly line in certain respects. Try to at least make it a little bit as much as we can chestnut checkers. But I think your message definitely resonates. So I guess the first question I won't ask is, what do you want to be in 5 years? I'll strike that one and we can go somewhere else. But maybe within the dream and plan phase, can you give maybe a practical example of how you actually used 5 Dynamics to kind of be that language to help somebody do that? Because everybody dreams and plans differently based on their energies. But how have you kind of used that to help create some type of structure for someone to kind of go through those 2 elements?
Yeah, so when we think about our career planning, we don't actually articulate it in the template itself. It comes more into the conversations that we encourage managers and people like me to have with the people that are making their plans. So really, we're talking about it in terms of, think about your 5 Dynamics profile. For the explore phase, or for the dream phase, we're asking you to lean into explore. Now, if this isn't an area that you have particularly high energy, you may want to, take some time with another colleague or with me or with your manager to lean into this brainstorming activity. And then we set up kind of the questions to ask yourself and give them a space in their template to record their answers. When we get to the plan part of the conversation, that's where we're saying, all right, now let's lean into excite and think about some of the folks that, maybe demonstrate some of the skills that you want to develop further. How can you make connections to those folks? Do you need help with that? Do you have high levels of excite energy? Do you maybe not? Maybe you can connect with somebody who can be a connector for you. examine, leaning into the actual planning, the getting into the nitty-gritty of what those skills are and what experiences do you need in order to help you develop those skills. I think that's where we get into, like, again, get specific, right? Examine is all about the details. For someone like me who doesn't have super high levels of examine energy, that can be a little tougher. So I might need some help being pressed to get specific on some of those things. So that's kind of how we're using it. We're not using it in a very, like, what I want to say, overt way in terms of, okay, now explore, now examine. We're using it as that common language because it's so well integrated into our culture. People understand it. Rather than just saying, okay, go brainstorm, I can say, in order to do that, why don't you lean into that explore energy?
Yeah. And again, what I love what you just said is, like, there's the process, but then there's the people. You have to combine both of those, because you can ask someone to go explore, but if they're have lower energies, they might need a little boost. Another question that just came in, and this was something that I was actually going to ask. So in my 25 years in learning and development, I found employee development less to be about encouraging the employees to take charge of the development and more about educating leaders on the importance of creating capacity for the employee to learn. And I think for me, what resonates with that question is, well, I don't want to even talk about a career. They're my best salesperson. I don't want to lose them. And I think there's this fear that it's not going to work out. And I think just double clicking on that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. And I think that that's, one of the things we talk about in many of our manager development programs is celebrating everyone's next play. That, again, is part of LinkedIn's culture. And I'll say it's pretty unique to our culture in a lot of ways, at least given my experience at other organizations. I've never personally had a manager who told me, no, you can't. I'm going to do everything I can to get in your way of you leaving. But I have had managers who have not been super supportive of my wanting to move in the past. So I will say that's something culturally that you have to work on with your people managers, to make sure that we want to be an organization where people can be successful in the ways that they want to be successful, because that's actually what's going to make us most successful. Just because somebody is a great salesperson doesn't mean they can't also be a great learning and talent person, right? You can find another great salesperson who eventually may also become a great something else. The idea is that we want greatness we want people to be able to express their greatness in whatever capacity is going to be most beneficial to them, because that's ultimately what's most beneficial to us for lots of reasons. Helps us retain people as well as achieve results.
Yeah, totally. And in my experience as a people leader and having managers that were responsible for, having some type of conversation, I felt like, in terms of diagnosing why it went wrong, right, was either that first, kind of what we just talked about. Secondly, they actually didn't have the tools to instigate it. They'd ask us a question like, well, what do you want to do? And it's just kind of this, like, yes, no. Like, I'm, as a father, I know that that's not the types of questions you want to ask your kids, is yes, no questions. You want kind of more exploratory, open-ended ones. And then, creating a structure around, yes, you're going to go have a lunch and learn, but here's some conversation starters. And we kind of get into this when we talk about mentoring too. If I am effortless plus excite and I have an abundant examine mentor, you can imagine the two ends of a battery and trying to create that dialogue in terms of they're thinking this is a waste of time. All I want to do is talk. And so I think that, again, understanding the people piece of it as much as the process, I think really kind of makes it a big difference.
Yeah. And I will say, when we were talking about career action plan templates, this conversation as well, it's really about educating the folks that every conversation, every plan is going to be a little bit different. Everyone is going to approach it a little bit differently. Again, based in part on their profile, likely where they have high and low energies. And so we do a lot of not only individual conversations with people about how to create their career plans, but I've led tons of sessions with people managers on just that. These conversations, you're going to have to tailor them to the individual. That can be uncomfortable for you because it may not align with your personal style. And they may want things that you don't even understand why they would want that for their careers. But your job is to help understand why, and then help them achieve what it is that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, comment from Karen, which I think both of us will high five, is reframing coaching someone into a greater role or a different role is actually that means that I did something and developed that person that is wanted by somebody else. That's a completely different perspective, right? In terms of going, I lost them. And again, it's kind of glass half full or glass half empty, right? In terms of kind of that approach. And again, I think that, career development, to me, the word is really just, it's a career conversation. Sometimes we put these words associated that make it feel big and bulky and mechanical. And when you actually sit down as a leader and ask somebody what interests you, et cetera, what the unintended consequence of that is, you actually demonstrate an empathy unintentionally. And I think that's another hugely beneficial characteristic of a leader that's actually taking the time to take interest in, well, what makes you go? What are you passionate about? And I think oftentimes you're surprised that all of a sudden the team member goes, oh, you're interested in creative design? I didn't even know that. Oh my gosh, there's a total need for that. And they're actually beginning to create their own way and own path. So I think we've experienced that internally as well. So
yeah, a couple of thoughts there. Just in terms of Karen's comment, I think we can sort of think of it in through the lens of serving a higher purpose. Of course, we all want to meet our KPIs, our OKRs, our objectives, and our goals, and we want our teams to be successful. But even more rewarding than that is helping someone realize their potential as an individual, what it is that they want for their career. Because hopefully by doing that, we're setting them up to want to stay and want to continue to do great work within the organization. But even if not, showing them that, we care about them as individuals. And again, that's a lot of the career conversation sessions that I lead with people leaders. We focus on that. We focus on, hey, you're going to have to take your sort of self-interest out of the equation during this conversation, right? Yeah, of course it's there in the back of your mind, but you want to put that aside for a moment to really understand what it is that the employee wants for themselves, and then look for ways that might align to what it is that your group can do. You may find that your group can do some things that you didn't even think was possible because this person is interested in something outside of the scope of their current role in the form in which it exists. So.
Yeah, totally. So I can see a new bumper sticker in 2024 for LinkedIn celebrating everyone's next play. If I don't see those on t-shirts at your next conference, I think
it's really, I will say,
totally.
It's coming from other organizations. It's really refreshing to see how people are celebrated, even when they leave the organization.
Totally. I agree. I experienced that myself, in kind of making this pivot as well. There were more high fives than kind of anything else. So cool. Well, that wraps up our questions kind of from the audience. But again, Kevin, thank you for your participation and reframing, I think, how organizations can approach career development, career pathing, career conversations. Coming from a company like LinkedIn, I think there's a lot of weight there. So thank you again. For everyone else that's stuck around till the end, thank you for your participation, your